correct to say that 0 children have died, from COVID-19. That's a pretty huge, claim and statement to make. And just ask yourselves, does that even make sense? Like for like 0 children to die from something. So I'll just end it right there and pass the baton on to whoever you want to speak next.
Eugene, you're saying 2% of the kid population in the U.S.?
That's correct. 2% all-cause mortality for children. That's the latest paper that came out in JAMA. It was published on January 30th of 2023.
So got to be a lot of kids dying.
What's that number of kids?
Eugene, how come?
So what is that number of kids? What's 2% of the kids' population?
So 2%, you'd have to then, take the whole population age.
Grant, it's 890.
890 what?
It's 896 because some doctor just told me that I was a psycho, and I just read the study that he sent to me. 890 kids from up until July of last year.
Eugene
890 under the age of 19.
I mean,
right.
How big is the kids' population in America?
Eugene, see, this is the problem with doctors. You guys know medical, but you don't know how to do math. No,
Mary,
I'm asking.
Mary,
2% of the
Mary, please, Mary. Just Eugene, do you have any idea how many kids are in America? I mean, what age group are we talking about?
I don't have that off the top of my head, like how many children there are. 0 to
So you just took the 2% number is like
the 2% came from the study, right? So I don't know how many children there are in America age 0 to 19. I'm not a robot, so
yeah.
Grant, it's of the students, of the kids that died. 2% died of the coronavirus. That's what the study is. Not that 2% died. Of those that died, 2% died of the coronavirus.
Got it.
Yes.
Okay. So I need to find out how many kids are in America.
896 is how many died.
So
yes.
I can do the math.
There are 82 million. There are 82 million children. This is Joanna. I saw this study as well, Eugene. I feel like, I'm happy to jump in as well.
Yeah. So 896 into 82 million. That would be like 0.0001%.
Dr. Joanna, so let me ask you this question about this particular study. So the 2% that Dr. Gu is referencing, is that 2% from kids that contracted the virus, or 2% of kids in America, period?
So yeah, just to take a step back, just to clarify some of the numbers with this particular study. In fact, there was a new article that was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA, just within the past week or so. But I think the bigger question is I think what we're really kind of trying to get to the meat and potatoes of here is how severely does COVID-19 manifest in children and young adults? So according to this article, while pediatric mortality is always devastating, of course, COVID actually accounted for only 1,289 deaths from the start of the pandemic to about 6 months ago, which was July of 2022. So of the approximate 1 million people who died of COVID over that period, it was, again, 1,289 kiddos aged 0 to 19 years old. And this is in an American population of 331 million people, 82 million of whom are children. So still, what this article established was that COVID-19 exists as the 8th leading cause of death among children, and that is falling behind, and this is in order. Number 1 was certain perinatal conditions. Number 2 was accidents and unintentional injuries. 3 was congenital malformations. 4 was homicide. 5 was suicide. 6 was cancer. And 7 was heart disease. 8 was COVID, and 9, I think, was actually influenza. This was the first year that was the case. But just to clarify the study a little bit.
Thank you for that clarification. So what I'm trying to do now, I'm just trying to go through all the speakers on stage just to get everyone's perspective before we really just start diving into this debate, right? So let me go to Dr. Molly. Dr. Molly, what is your stance when it comes to this topic and the conversation thus far?
Never should children be vaccinated for COVID-19. So I think she said the total number of deaths in children was 1,200. How many kids have died from the shots? And we know it's at least over 350, but that is only people who acknowledge that it's death after the shot. We've had an epidemic of children having strokes and dying. And if you look, I put in the nest kind of what you guys were calculating on the calculator, which is children's risk of dying from COVID is similar to the odds of dying from a sharp object. So, and their risk of being hospitalized from myocarditis is 6 to 7 times higher than their risk of being hospitalized for COVID.
You know, Nelson, Dr. Molly just said, never under any circumstance do you vaccinate a kid. And that right there is painful
For
for me.
COVID.
For COVID, exactly, for COVID. That's painful for me to listen to, because she's a medical doctor, and she's saying under no circumstance that she can find no circumstance that you should vaccinate a child without without evaluating that child or anything.
I stand behind that.
So that's the danger that we have here. It's not about being reasonable. Okay, it's not about being reasonable at all. What you guys are saying is, I know it, and then people are like, hey, don't trust the doctors. People are right, and they don't trust the doctors anymore. And if a doctor recommend that your kid get a biopsy, or your kid get whatever treatment, are you guys questioning that, saying, oh no, I'm not going to do it? Once again, I think we need to listen to our pediatrician. But Dr. Molly, I'm be honest with you, that was absolutely reckless what you just said, because someone in this space can listen to you and take that to heart and follow that advice. Okay, and it's a child that probably should be vaccinated. Okay, I'm not saying every child should be vaccinated, but the rare case that child should be vaccinated, you're telling them not to do it under no circumstance. And you, ma'am, you're playing with people's lives. You're playing with people's lives, and that's all I got to say. That is irresponsible for you as a doctor to say without first looking at the individual and doing an evaluation of that individual. Yo.
Can I rebut that?
Absolutely.
Cool. So I've been in these spaces before. I have very nuanced conversations, and you're generally right. But in this case, giving a child something that is proven to be myocardial toxin, I 100% stand behind that. No child should be getting this shot. This is cardiotoxic, it is thrombogenic, and children have a statistically 0% chance of dying of COVID. Children do not have ACE receptors in their throat, they do not have TMP RSS receptors, and they do not go into cytokine storm. So I stand behind it, and it's not reckless. It's reckless for anybody who doesn't understand statistics that wants to put children at risk of dying and not waking up in the morning.
Absolutely. Well, we definitely appreciate your perspective, Dr. Molly. Jonathan as well. Let me go to Brian Krasenstein. I mean, Brian, the number one. I mean, between you and Jonathan, I don't know who's the number one liberal on this app, man. but
Yeah, hey,
I
Nelson.
love the both of you regardless. So, Brian, let's talk about it, man. What's your stance?
Yeah, so going back to the beginning of COVID and when the vaccine first came out, I have a 6-year-old and a 4-year-old. I got the 6-year-old the vaccine and the booster at the time. This was when things were a little bit less certain. We still didn't know a ton about how it affected children, the virus. So I went ahead and listened to our doctor, and she said to get it for him. I held off on she was 3 at the time, and I haven't gotten her the vaccine yet. I did this because I feel that the newer variants are less severe. We have more numbers that show that kids are not dying. It's not as risky for children. So I've held off on that. I think that ultimately it should be a decision made between the parents and the pediatrician, and like any medical decision, it should be done in a way that both the parent and the pediatrician feels it's safe, and it should be left up to the parents and the pediatrician. So I don't think it should be mandated, but I also don't think people should be saying don't get the vaccine if you have a kid, because I do think, especially some kids who are immunocompromised, I think it's important that they probably do get the vaccine.
Now, one thing I want us to speak on, and one thing I think, myself as well as a lot of people in this room are trying to learn, are there any risks associated with children getting vaccinated? Right? I mean, with adults, on Twitter, on the internet on a daily basis, we're hearing, from people who have apparently been vaccine injured, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Is there any data showing, risks associated from the vaccine with children? And I want to toss that to Dr. Eugene first.
Every intervention that we do in medicine carries some kind of risk. And there's almost nothing that you can think of that has no risk. And so when it comes to children, yes, of course, any vaccine has a small amount of risk for your kids, and that's why I would echo what Brian said. I believe Joanna said the same thing. This is a conversation between the parents and the pediatrician. Every patient, every person involved in medicine, there's something called informed consent, right? So why not just let patients have this conversation, or the parents in this case have this conversation with the informed medical professionals involved in their care, and make the decision among themselves. Why categorically say, just because we're here on Twitter, hey, nobody get the vaccine, or everybody get the vaccine, or mandate this, or prohibit this? That's not our place, right? This decision has to be made between the pediatrician and, in this case, the parents.
Dr.
Do
Molly.
you have children?
I'm trying to, but not yet.
Would you
But I don't think
vaccinate
that
them if
would
you had them
validate
today?
my I mean, I don't know the answer to that, right? Just kind of like how Brian was talking about for his 3-year-old. Information is evolving. The variants are getting less severe, thankfully.
Based on the
Some
information
of the
you have
older
today, if you
vaccines
had a
might not be as
2-year-old, would you
effective
vaccinate them?
against the newer variants, right? So I would make that determination in the moment,
Yeah.
with the latest available data.
So based on today's data, if you had a 2-year-old today, would you vaccinate the child?
I would think it over with my wife and talk to our pediatrician. So I don't know the answer right now as of this moment.
It's 50-50,
I
or
would
No,
want to.
like
it's
if it was
50
up to
50,
you only,
I would want to
Eugene. If it
weigh
was
the
up to you,
risks
if
and the
it was up to
benefits
you,
too,
like,
for my 3-year-old or for my 2-year-old, right?
okay, do you know who your
I
pediatrician's going to be?
Not yet.
Yeah. Okay.
I have to choose one, right?
So, yeah, but if you had to make the decision on your own, based on the data you have today, kids 2 years old, would you vaccinate based on the data you have today without talking to your wife or the pediatrician?
I mean, I actually don't know
It's a hypothetical, man. It's not.
the answer
We're
to
not going
that.
to hold you to it.
We're just hypothetical. I it's always a very it's a personal decision.
I
What
know it's
kind of
personal. That's
intervention
why I'm asking you a
for your
personal
kids?
question.
Yeah, so I gave the answers. I actually don't know as of this
Okay.
moment what I would do.
Because you're
Yeah.
concerned about the vaccine, or
Because the benefit to risk ratio is different for children than it is for adults, right? So
yeah.
if you ask me, would let's say that my grandparent was not vaccinated,
No, I'm just asking
absolutely
you
I would
about your
take him
kids. I'm not worried
vaccinated.
about your
I would not
grandparents.
even think twice about it.
Yeah, I'm not.
For a 3-year-old, for a
Yeah,
2-year-old, I'd have to think
yeah,
about it. I would.
Grant, I'm not gonna beat around the bush. I wouldn't.
yeah. I mean, it's point zero
I'm not
zero
gonna.
zero
Let's let.
zero 1%.
If we're up here being
Let's be
honest, guys.
honest,
Let's be
man. Come
honest.
on.
Even if we're I'm pro-vaccine as a motherfucker. But I'll be honest, I wouldn't. That's why I said if my child's pediatrician, told me that I should get my child vaccinated, that's when I will get my child vaccinated. I will start considering getting my child back. But once again, even though I feel very strongly about the vaccine, but once again, you know, uh, I just would keep it real. I wouldn't, unless what I'm saying, I had a conversation with my pediatrician. Hopefully, we can all have some honesty up here while we're having this conversation. And that's not a knock on the vaccine. It's just with everything that's going on, I just want to make sure that I give my children the best chance possible at everything.
Jonathan, for me, right, hearing you say that, I mean, the next question that comes to mind, because I know you're a pro vaxxer. I mean, you have multiple booster shots. I know that's your
I'm pro
deal.
like a motherfucker. I'm pro,
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly, right? So, the question for me is, okay, so this guy that's taking multiple jabs, right? All of a sudden doesn't want to vaccinate his kids. My next question is why, right?
See, it's
Because
okay.
if you're so comfortable with, yourself getting, vaccinated, why is it that you're hesitant when it comes to your kids?
Not hesitant, Nelson. Once again, unlike anti-vaxxers, I have the uncomfortable position of being tethered to the truth. Okay, and when you look at the data, okay, the data says that that my kids probably could forego it unless there's some extenuating circumstance. All right, so once again, I feel the vaccine is safe. You know what I'm saying? I feel it's completely safe, but once again, there's always that possibility of whatever little thing. Because guess what? People take Tylenol for forever, and that the side effect or adverse reaction because of the way my body chemistry or whatever. Someone's like it is whatever. So I want to avoid putting in my child as much as I possibly can in terms of medicine or whatever. So it's not unusual. But so when you look at the data and you look at the math, I'm like, okay, great. You know what? I will I will hold off. And you look at Brian. Brian said he held off on his child. And once again, there's nothing wrong
Yeah,
with
yeah,
being
but
pro.
but Brian has more common sense than you. I mean, we know that.
Now,
You
but
know.
here's the thing. Here's the thing. So when there's nothing. That's why we got to be honest when we're having these conversations. We got to be truthful, even when the truth is uncomfortable. And so right now, the truth may be a little uncomfortable for Dr. Eugene, but that hesitancy that Dr. Eugene has, and I hate to say this, do this to you, Dr. Eugene, because I respect the hell out of you, leads me to believe that you wouldn't, you know? And I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I just want to make sure the audience, when they're listening to us, that when we're talking, that we're speaking with conviction and that we're not being false in what we're saying. That's all. And I yield.
Can
Hey
I hop
Nelson, can I jump in? This is Mary.
Let me go to Sarah. Sarah hasn't spoken today. Sarah, how's it going, and how do you feel about the conversation? What are your thoughts?
Thank you. So for context, I am pro-vax. However, and I have 3 sons. They're all adults. But if they were 2 or any age, 0 to 19, and they were healthy, I would be hesitant simply because of the data that it does not have the effect on children. Now, if my child had a comorbidity like asthma or cystic fibrosis, something where getting this disease could harm them, then yes, I would. But if they're healthy and have not had any medical issues, I would not.
Sarah, I'm not gonna lie to you, right? So I've heard that from Jonathan. I've heard that from Brian. I've heard it from Dr. Eugene. Now I'm hearing it from you. Listen, right? For everyone in this room that's sort of hesitant when it comes to the vaccine and has been, right? And we hear from you guys, who happen to be pro COVID-19 vaccine, saying that there's a possibility that you would not vaccinate your kids. I mean, the level of curiosity in the room starts to rise,
Well,
as it is doing with me right now.
let me
I'm kind of
qualify that.
curious, like why aren't they as comfortable with their kids getting vaccinated?
Well, let me qualify that. When we talk about adults, especially for myself, I'm type 1 diabetic. I don't want to get a disease or COVID-19 where I could be hospitalized and I may not recover, as well as maybe you, Nelson, who you may be perfectly healthy and not have the issue. But if my child is perfectly healthy and doesn't have any underlying medical condition, then I wouldn't. However, HPV, I'd vaccinate my child against HPV with no problem. But COVID-19, where it has a low mortality rate for children, probably not.
Absolutely, absolutely. By the way, guys, for everybody, requesting to get on stage, it's I invited everybody up here on stage personally. So I definitely want to, at least for the first hour of the conversation, I definitely want to focus, that on the experts, and once again, I appreciate you guys for jumping in here. Appreciate you guys for giving me and the rest of the people in the room your time tonight. So thank you for that. But in the meantime, let me go to Brick Suit. Right? I'm gonna go to Brick Suit, then I'm gonna bounce it back to Dr. Molly. Brick Suit. What are you as curious as I am right now about this, bro?
I am curious. I am curious about it.
Let's talk
my
about
voice?
it then.
All right, so let's talk about it. Let's admit that there are childhood fatalities from COVID. That's a given. I'm not on the standpoint that there's no morbidity, but it's extremely low. And like Dr. Eugene has pointed out, the risk benefit analysis is what we should be looking at. And he's talked about the benefit not being as strong because children are able to, and so they have such a low morbidity on this that it's not as much of an issue. And as we go through time, COVID is becoming less deadly. At the same time, what wasn't mentioned is that the risk for children over time is much greater than the risk of someone who is 80. Okay. Someone who's 80, we don't know what the risks of this type of vaccine are going to be 15, 20 years down the road. But we know that if we mandate that children get it, we'll be saddling with them with that risk. Now, that being said, I think that it's totally understandable that if your doctor tells you, and you have a consultation that your child has a condition that makes them extremely vulnerable were they to get COVID, or if in the future they are able to develop genetic tests that find out if somebody has specific markers that will make them more susceptible to the most adverse risk cases of COVID, that those children should, in good conscience, be vaccinated. But I think what we really need to talk about is, should vaccination for children be mandated? And the reason that that's trying to be pushed is in part because of the National Childhood Vaccine Injury Program, which basically states that any vaccine that is mandated for children cannot be sued for. If you have an injury from that vaccine that's mandated for children, you cannot sue the manufacturer later. It's a no-fault insurance program. Now, if the COVID vaccine is never mandated for children, it will never be part of that no-fault insurance program. And eventually, when it becomes if it ever does become a non-EUA use vaccine, it will fall under the manufacturers will have liability for it at that time. And I believe that there's a real strong chance that this is why we're seeing the push to mandate vaccines for children. It's so the manufacturers can have exclusion from liability in perpetuity per that vaccine injury policy.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Let's go to Mary. Mary, you want to jump in? Let's go.
Yeah, I guess, the part we were just talking about in the last room, and I know we're in a new room now, is just, I don't understand, for everybody that's out there, I'm going to have a conversation with my pediatrician. We learned over the last year that your pediatricians and your doctors don't even begin, they are not the scientists. They don't work for the government. They don't work for Pfizer. They don't work for they listen to Pfizer, they listen to the government, and they listen to all of these journals that are completely wrong, that are in bed with all of these different companies. So, like, when you say, I'm going to listen to my pediatrician.
Guys, is this me or is she breaking up? Is it me?
I can hear her okay.
I can hear her too.
Or you guys are good? Okay, it's probably me.
Just saying.
Go ahead, Mary.
Just for everybody that's out there, what does your pediatrician know? For all due respect to every medical professional, but truly, what does your pediatrician know that you don't know, that you're not taking the time to educate yourself? Please, please, please take your time to educate yourself like the rest of us have done, and learn that the fact that the chance of your child, I would like to know with Omicron, like I keep saying that when Omicron came out, it was a Christmas miracle. Like, you can be sure that was a bad Christmas for Pfizer and Moderna and everybody else, but for the rest of us, it was a great Christmas, because finally we were at a place where we didn't have to worry. And the fact that it was so, what was it, 13 times the infection rate. It's like, bless us. That is great. Let's go. Let's go. Let's go. Let's get everybody infected as we possibly can. People are like, what are you saying? You're crazy. No, because it's like the flu. It's less than the flu. So when you guys are talking about this and you're talking about this disease, let's start thinking back about like Omicron, you know, Omicron is like, it's less than the flu in many cases now, you know? And so like we're in this position where you guys are keep talking about a disease. I'm going to talk to my pediatrician. And also for those of you guys that, you know, let me get the booster. You know what? First of all, I would never vaccinate my children ever. There's so many things that we've learned about it. And I can't even imagine vaccinating a 2, 3, 4-year-old, regardless of whether they have pre-existing conditions, because that makes zero sense to me. If it was something else, polio, whatever, maybe, but not for this. And then secondarily, my mother, we kept asking, begging my mother not to get the booster, begging her. She has diabetes, begging her not to get the booster. She got it anyway. You know why? Because she trusted her doctor, because she wanted to listen to her doctor. 9 days after she got the booster, she suffered 2 strokes, and then she suffered 2 strokes over a 3-day period of time, and then she suffered another stroke. We had to airlift her twice to a hospital. And now she went through a rehabilitation center. She was perfectly fine. And now here we are, you know, and she had diabetes. And you know what we said in the beginning? Yeah, during Delta, yeah, you know, maybe it seemed like that was the right decision. But now all of a sudden, you know what? The rehabilitation center, you know what they shared with us? Is that the majority of the people that were in the rehabilitation center, they were all booster patients.
Mary,
Our medical professionals have been lying to us. And this is not the disease that we all saw in 2021. And when you start running numbers about how many kids have died, let's start running some numbers from Omicron by itself instead of running numbers from the very beginning, because the numbers are going to be skewed, just like the FDA, just like the WHO, and just like Pfizer and Moderna want. They want us to skew the numbers. They want to terrify us.
yeah.
And I'm sorry, it's just the case. Why don't we start? Jonathan, why don't we start running numbers from Omicron?
Yeah, but
Oh
Mary,
no, because they don't think about
you,
it,
you
because
said
there's
some very
nobody there that
dangerous
wants
stuff.
to.
Oh, you said
No,
first of all,
what did I say that was dangerous?
okay, yeah, you said some very dangerous stuff. First, folks. First of all, Omicron isn't like the flu, okay, and then it's not certainly not less than the flu, okay. So that's coming from Mary. That's not coming from
Jonathan. It is.
one
It
second,
is.
Mary.
It
That's
is.
not
Run
coming
the
from.
numbers. Find the
That's not
numbers.
coming from the host of this room, okay? Because and then and you're very contradictory as well in your statement. If anyone truly listened to what you were saying, you just knocked yourself out yourself when you said Omicron. It wasn't a good Christmas for Pfizer because Omicron came along. Okay, because when Omicron came along, yeah, but essentially there was no need for it. But what you alluded to was there was a need for the vaccine prior to that. Okay, then you went on and you said a lot of things that just
No, wait,
no,
Jonathan. I
I'm
think
talking
you're not bright enough to follow me.
no that Mary, let's not talk about bright, okay, because you're a hairdresser, so don't start that bright shit, okay. We could talk, we could do that, all right. So no. So anyway,
Why are you attacking her, man? Come on.
no, she just hold on, Nelson. She attacked me talking about I wasn't bright, so no, let's not do that, okay. She was the one that did the first attack, so I don't want to do that. I was actually debating her points. All right. So let's be cool. Let's be fair here. So Mary, once again, it's dangerous to get up here and you're telling people. You said don't listen to your pediatrician. You know more than them. You also said that you know more than them. They don't.
No, I said to get educated.
No,
because
you
your
said
pediatrician may
you
not
said don't
know.
listen to it. One second. You said don't listen to your pediatrician. You know more than them. Is what you said. I know what you said because I listened because I said, oh, so that's why they went there. That's why they spent 8, 12 years in school. Okay, so that you can know more than them. That doesn't make sense. You said so much stuff that was dangerous, okay, to people. And we just got to be, look, we're here. I understand it's tourist spaces. It's the Wild West of sorts, okay? But we got to put some guardrails on this stuff because when you get up here and say stuff like that, and you got over 1,000 people in the room, all right, and you're just spewing off, and people, I don't know why these doctors are quiet. Even the anti-vax doctors should be up in arms saying something about all the stuff you're saying. Because it's that damn dangerous. Now,
I want to hear from Dr. Gu on this. I want to see what Dr. Gu thinks. Dr. Gu, do you share the same perspective as Jonathan?
So I do agree with Jonathan on one thing in that the pediatrician in that specific example knows more than any of us here because the pediatrician has access to the child's medical record, right? The pediatrician has a relationship with the patient, right? So none of us here can override what a pediatrician out in the community knows about the children, their vaccination record, all of their comorbidities, and just the patient itself. And so like I think it's very presumptuous for strangers on Twitter Spaces, no matter what credentials we have or what have you. You can be a hairdresser, you can be a pediatrician, you could be the top of your game and the best doctor ever here, but that still doesn't override that patient doctor relationship. And so that's where I would agree with Jonathan. Like, we have no place to tell what pediatricians out in the community can do with their patients, and the conversations they have with the parents of those patients.
Okay, I just want to respond to this. I'm sorry, but I just have to say this. What would you say to all of those parents whose kids died because the pediatrician decided that they knew more than the parents and that they made a decision to have a healthy child get a vaccination? I'm sorry. I disagree with you.
You just said you didn't. You just said you didn't say that the parents should that the parents didn't know more than the pediatrician. You're arguing against your whole point. You just go ahead.
Jonathan, what I said was you didn't. I don't know if you just didn't catch that. I said that when Omicron came along, it was a Christmas miracle because it was not life-threatening anymore, and it was so incredible. Like
False.
everybody. Oh, really? Oh, so it was as serious as Delta? Really? Like,
Never said it's as serious as Delta. Didn't
it's
say
not
that.
even close. Not even close. They had
Okay.
a hard time finding anybody that died of it for several months. So, like,
That's
for
not
you to
true.
sit here,
That's not
that
true.
it is true. It is true. When Omicron came out,
Doctors,
they
can
couldn't
you guys
find
jump in, please?
anybody.
Anti-vax doctors,
They
jump in.
couldn't
Let her
find
know that
anybody that had
Omicron was
died of
killing
it for the
people.
first 2 months. No, they couldn't find anybody that had died of it. Maybe from it,
Doctor,
but not of it.
anti-vax doctors, please save your credibility. Jump in here.
I'm a doctor and I'll jump in here, and she is false. That is not true. People do die from Omicron and it is still killing people. Certainly not in the numbers of Delta or in the original waves, but Jonathan is correct in that situation that it is killing people still. But I would like to say something to Dr. Eugene. I'm a PhD toxicologist as well as a practicing MD for 25 years. I have credentials in both. And one of the tenets of medicine that we have always practiced by, and I'm listening to this room and I had to jump in because everyone in here is risk stratifying. Dr. Eugene brought it up. Everyone's talking about it. You're not identifying what it is, but what you're doing is you're doing a risk benefit analysis. And you're all wondering if the risks or if the benefits outweigh the risks. And we do that routinely as physicians, constantly with our patients. Now I'm going to ask Dr. Eugene this question. Did it not bother you that we were not permitted?
I would like to make a comment for clarification here.
One second, Dr. Margaret. We have another doctor speaking right now.
Hi, this is Dr. Margaret Aranda. I'm anesthesiology and critical care.
Dr. Margaret, one second. I'm good. Dr. Margaret, I don't think you can hear her. It's probably a Twitter glitch. So, Dr. Margaret, I'm just going to toss you down and bring you back up just so you can hear everybody else on stage, okay?
So, Dr. Eugene, did it not bother you that we were not permitted to risk stratify these vaccines? From the day they came out, we were told they were 100% safe, and we were not permitted as clinicians to do a risk-benefit analysis for these vaccinations.
So, I was also practicing during the pandemic, right? And giving vaccines to patients and doing that risk-benefit analysis. No government agency forced me to vaccinate anybody, right? And if a patient refused to be vaccinated, I absolutely respected, the informed consent decision of my patients. So I guess I'm confused about what you're talking about with regard to, are you saying that the government forced you to vaccinate all your patients during COVID-19?
No, I'm saying there was a huge push for it, but I'm also saying they told us they were 100% safe.
You're a physician, right? So you had your own autonomy to vaccinate or not vaccinate your patients, right? As a physician, I vaccinated patients that I felt benefited from the vaccines, especially the elderly patients with multiple comorbidities like hypertension, obesity. diabetes, what have you. But you're implying that the government forced all of us as physicians to just vaccinate everybody that came into our doors. And
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
going
they
to push
kind of
back
did.
against that and say
Now
that
they
didn't
kind
happen.
of did. They kind of did.
They
They
didn't.
really pushed us hard. And I'll tell you what, if the patient asked us, the narrative was we were not supposed to speak against the vaccinations. There was a huge push for us not to speak against them, not to do any kind of risk stratification. Very early on, I began risk stratifying my young males who were presenting. Some of them were getting myocarditis, and I pushed very hard not to vaccinate this cohort, yet they're still mandating this vaccine in the colleges for young men at this age. It's mandated to go to college.
Right,
So
but
don't
no
tell me.
government agency, the CDC, the FDA, nobody came into your office and said, doctor, you have to vaccinate all the
You're
patients,
splitting
right?
hairs.
You
Men are
had
being
the power and the
mandated.
authority to vaccinate who you felt needed to be vaccinated, and if you felt as a physician that the benefits did not outweigh the risks, you were completely free not to vaccinate your patients,
But
right?
did
See, that's a
I
little
believe that's true.
disingenuous, though, because there were people who needed medical.
So not fair what you're doing, Eugene.
Well, I mean, it's a good debate. I mean, I like it. Shit, but real quick, Brick Suit. Let me have one mic on Dr. Eugene and Dr. TM. Let's just have one mic on them while they do this discourse.
Yeah, I mean,
So
I'll just say the final thing is, Dr. TM, you're talking about the pressure that you might have felt on social media or in like the way that the CDC and everyone was talking about how the vaccines were extremely important to, hopefully end the pandemic that was claiming a lot of lives. But there's a huge difference between how you felt that society was treating the vaccines versus how the law permitted you as a physician to choose, do you want to administer the vaccine or not. You were
then
not forced
justify,
to administer vaccines to patients.
then justify for me why they are still mandated in the young cohort that is
That
presenting.
has nothing to do with what goes on in your office or in any private physician's office, right? If I decided that I did not want to vaccinate one of my patients, I could do that, right? If I felt that as a physician, I'm putting my medical license here on the line and say, hey, I think that the risk of vaccinating you outweighs the benefit, so I'm not going to do that. I could do that, and the FDA, CDC, nobody, the FBI, they can't come into my office and say you did something wrong, and no, you have to, vaccinate your patient.
I'm going to put back again on you. If I were in California, there is that risk. There is now there's an injunction on it, but there is now that risk in California. So I'm going to push back there too.
Well, that's why that there's a federal judge who said that's not constitutional, right?
No,
any state can try to pass some unconstitutional laws, but that's why we have a legal system that says, hey, you can't pass crazy laws that
that's
violate people's
temporary.
rights.
You agree that would be crazy if they
Yeah, you
passed
talk
it, though.
about California state law
because
AB
there's an injunction
2098.
on it. It still could be passed, by the way.
That's
So
a ridiculous
just for
law,
the
but that's why
record, though, the
the
doctor
federal
did say
judge,
that would be crazy.
put an injunction on it. I don't think that law is constitutional,
Yeah.
right?
So you agree
there's
that
an injunction on it.
that would be over the top if they enforced
Well, yeah,
that.
because you can't
So
like
how
the
did you
government
feel,
can't interfere with medical
Eugene?
practice.
How did you feel then when the government was using OSHA laws to force businesses at the point of $14,000 per person fines if they did not enforce the vaccine on employees?
Well, I've never been for vaccine mandates, so
Okay, so
no, I don't think the government
did you
has a
speak
place
up
in
against it?
mandating things.
Did you speak up against it?
I did. In fact, Grant, in the very, very beginning of the pandemic, right when they were rolling out the vaccines in the first, I think it was like December of 2020, before we had all the data and everything on the effectiveness or the safety of the vaccines, I actually, made a series of tweets talking about, I made a thread that this is a new technology. We should be very cautious about it. It's not clear to me without the data that it's 100% safe and effective. I got totally canceled for that way back, but that was when it was the very, very beginning before we had any data. Now I've seen a lot more data. 5.5 billion people around the world have been vaccinated now. 71% of the world's population has been vaccinated, even though in all these spaces you hear all these anecdotes about myocarditis and adverse effects. If you take a look at the big picture here, adverse effects are extremely rare given the number of doses of the vaccines that have been given worldwide. 71% of the worldwide population has been vaccinated, and not everybody's dropping like flies, right? There are adverse effects, but they're extremely rare.
So who canceled you when you said you posted that on Twitter? Who canceled you?
Oh, like, just how cancel culture works on Twitter, right?
Other doctors, or Twitter,
other doctors, general members of the community.
And I
there
think
was a lot of pressure,
and this is what the other doctor was speaking about, the amount of pressure.
But that has nothing to do with how I practice medicine in my clinics, right? So, and that's a distinction that I want to make. Getting canceled on social media or getting pushback, that's one thing, but having the government come into your medical office and dictate your practice, that's a completely different thing, right? I think Dr. TM is conflating the two.
No, I'm not. But Dr. Eugene, does it not bother you that your American board did not say to you, as a physician, you probably should be doing some risk stratification here? Did that not send up a red flag to you? I mean, dear God, we risk stratify everything we do. It's the number one tenet of practicing medicine, yet not a single board came to us and said, you should be risk stratifying your patients for these vaccinations.
You're a physician, right? Every physician is empowered to do their own risk stratification based
but
on
we
their
get
practice.
Our guidelines from our boards. A lot of the boards that oversee the field of medicine we're in give us guidelines, and that should have been a red flag to every single doctor that we were not being told to risk stratify.
The guidelines that you're talking about is they're general guidelines, but they do not apply to every single patient that you have that has its own unique story, their own unique experiences, their own unique comorbidities, right? As a physician, you're supposed to take a look at every single patient separately and come to your own, use your critical thinking, all your training, and do your best practice. And nobody told you what to do with any one of your particular patients, right? You were still empowered to critically think for yourself and to make your own medical decision making.
Well, I've had some issues because I have done what has been, in my opinion, appropriate for patients, and there have been threats to the board. They wonder why other doctors did not speak up. To speak up or to speak out made you a target. And there are some of us that said, the hell with that, we're going to do it anyway. And when we did, we got a lot of pushback.
I'd like to speak to that.
Dr. Dr. TM, first of all, let me commend you, Dr. TM, for coming up here. I don't agree with nothing you said, but you know what? You had enough integrity to speak up and say Omicron is killing. So, you're trustworthy. You're very trustworthy in that regard because
she's trustworthy, but you don't agree with anything she's saying.
No. I don't agree. Well, because she's speaking for her truth. See, she's speaking her truth, Nelson. That's the difference, okay? Because that's something she believes in. Like Dr. Molly and all of them heard this woman say that Omicron wasn't killing anything, and they were happy to sit there and stay quiet about it and make the audience feel that was absolutely true because it went against a narrative of an anti-vaxxer. So, Dr. TM, I actually followed you, man, and I look forward to seeing you in more spaces.
Thank you.
But he doesn't agree with anything you're saying.
That's the beauty of it, Nelson. We still can love each other and not agree.
Well, Jonathan, I have to say to you, you are very articulate when it comes to medicine. Even though you don't have a degree in medicine, you're a critical thinker. And critical thinking is something that I've been pushing for everyone. And when you see these doctors that are speaking out, a lot of them are critical thinkers. And so when I say that to you, I listen to you say you will not vaccinate your children. And that leads me to believe that you question more of the narrative than you're willing to admit to, because you do recognize that the narrative has gone one direction. And as a critical thinker, you're saying to yourself, there's a little bit of a red flag there.
One. Did I lose you guys?
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me, Nelson?
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, you hear me?
Yeah, I can. Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah. I want to say to Dr. TM, Doctor, I'm not going to dispute what you just said, Dr. TM. I'm not at all.
So then you do agree with me a little bit.
Let me mute out. I'm going to mute out.
Dr. TM, trust me, Jonathan is a different beast. and you're gonna find out more and more about him as you keep coming to these rooms. Okay, but let me move the mic around. Dr. Margaret. By the way, Steve, I'm trying to send you an invite. I just sent you one. Dr. Margaret, jump in and let's talk about it.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate the fine conversation on both sides here. It's really nice to be able to debate and speak in the open. I want to say, number one, a lot of people don't know, and I'm taking a big umbrella and putting it over the risk-benefit ratio. Not every doctor took the Hippocratic Oath in the first place to do no harm. So if your doctor is telling you to give a vaccine, the first question you should say to them, did you take the Hippocratic Oath? Because in 1990, when I graduated, we had 3 choices at USC School of Medicine. 1, take the original Hippocratic Oath. 2, make up our own. Or 3, use part of it and do like a partial Hippocratic Oath. So a lot of people don't know, number one, that your doctor...
Are you being serious on this?
Sorry?
Are you being serious?
I'm being serious. Yes, I wrote an article on Substack on it. I'm serious. Almost nobody knows this. Way back in 1980 when I graduated, we didn't have to take the Hippocratic Oath. So that makes a big difference right there. If your doctor didn't take the Hippocratic Oath to do no harm, then what they say to you may not be to your benefit, I'm sorry to say. So you got to start off there, number one. Number 2, I put my money where my mouth is as an anesthesiologist. I'm not primary care. I could never advise a patient to take or not take the vaccine in that way, but I did write medical exemptions. I did prescribe ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine. I saw, like many of us, 2,500 patients by myself in 3 years, 0 deaths from COVID. And how many deaths has your doctor had from COVID? And number 3, I opposed Bill AB 2098 by doing an organized press release on the Capitol steps of Sacramento on September 30th with 15 doctors, lawyers, and activists there, including a teenager. How many people do you think were in the audience to support doctors and patients being able to say what they want in their own office building privately without the government telling us what I should tell you? How many people do you think were in the audience from the general public when we're on the steps? There were probably 45 people. Almost nobody was there. No doctor organizations, no nurses, no schools, no nothing. So what information you get is sometimes what they want you to get. And I'll make this perfectly clear. Governor Newsom knew exactly what he was doing by trying to push AB 2098, the COVID, quote, misinformation bill, through, because
Can you tell us what AB 2098 is again?
Yes. Yeah. So that would stop me and you if we were in the office alone. And I told you I did not think the vaccine was going to be good for you or for your child. You could go to the Medical Board of California and say, this doctor told me not to give a vaccine to myself or to my child. And I don't think that's right. This is what
Bobby just got an injunction. Bobby Kennedy got an injunction on.
That's right. That's right. And Richard Jaffe. Yes. So Governor Newsom knew exactly what he was doing by trying to make that pass. And if he did nothing that day, the bill would have passed with no action. Instead, he decided to make it clear to everyone that he specifically wanted them to know that he approved it by writing a letter, which had nothing to do with the law. It said, oh, yes, I believe that you and your doctor should have privacy and talk about what you want in the privacy of your own office. That's what his letter basically said, but that wasn't the law. So there was a tweet. This is my last point, and then I will yield the floor. My last point is that and I have this on my Substack. I have this on my Twitter. I'm at the Rebel Patient on both. There's a video where he's standing in behind a podium with a mic and the American flag behind him and the California seal. And he was making fun of Florida. Those people in Florida, they are coming after a witch hunt for the doctors. They want to control what the doctor is saying to the patients. At the end of the conversation, he pitched his body forward. he put his finger straight into the camera and he said, if they can do this to your doctor, they're going to come after you. So this is all of this we are talking about is a slippery slope. And not everybody sees that, but I'm just letting you know that, yes, 10 days later, I got my first request to surrender my license from the Medical Board of California, and I retired my practice at the end of December.
Wow. That's crazy.
And just for the topic of this room, would you vaccinate children?
Okay, so no. The reason why is, number one, none of us knew what was in it. The package insert that you open up, it's like a 1.5 by 1.5 feet long, was left intentionally blank. Nobody knew the half-life. Nobody knew what was in it, how long it would last, what the side effects were. We're supposed to get a whole list of things, like a pharmacy book on it. Any doctor that gave that, in my opinion, without knowing what was in it, without knowing the side effects, without being able to advise their patient, 0% rate of informed consent. It's impossible to give informed consent if you don't know what's in it.
Is that still the case today?
No, it's not. There is a package insert now, from what I understand. I've never seen a vial. I don't, dispense them in my office. I don't give shots. I wouldn't have done it. But yeah, so it's completely unethical.
Would you give the shot to the elderly?
No, I wouldn't. It's going to be a risk benefit ratio once again. Number two, okay, so let me tell you the other thing that's happening.
How many patients have you treated?
I know how to treat them without dying. 0 of my patients died.
Mm-hmm.
What do I need a vaccine for?
Dr. Margaret, let me ask you this clarifying question just real quick, right? So, I get your perspective when it comes to the kids, but in regards to the elderly, you think there is no benefit to them whatsoever for getting the COVID-19 vaccine. Is that what you're saying,
Nelson?
What I'm saying is that it's always going to be a risk-benefit ratio. And with the studies and the data that are out there right now, and with Pfizer admitting we never had a safety profile, we never had transmission, it's not going to stop your grandmother from getting it if you get vaccinated. Everything was a lie.
Let me bounce this to Drew comments. Gee, I think we should go to Drew comments real quick, right? And by the way, Dr. Margaret, thank you for being here.
Yeah,
really appreciate you joining the conversation.
I'm following you now, Dr. Margaret. I've never seen you in these spaces, so thank you so much for coming.
My pleasure. And stay out of the hospitals.
How can we? What are you going to do with your career now?
That's a great question. Thank you. Right now, I broke my arm. So I got mowed down by a dog at a park, and so I'm writing with one hand. I have a Substack at the Rebel Patient. I'm interviewing people. I have a Rebel. I have books coming out this year. I'm a traumatic brain injury survivor after being bedridden for 12 years. And I want to tell people too that God is a God of miracles. I couldn't even say the word "the." I could not stand up without fainting. I had dysautonomia, which is a post-vaccine injury and a long COVID injury too. So, and I just want to tell people, if you know anybody who's vaccine injured, God is a big God. He can do anything. If he can get me out of bed after 12 years being disabled, everybody left me for dead. My voice is here to tell you and speak life into your life, that God can overcome everything and make you 100% better. And thank you so much.
100%.
Yep.
100%.
I love your story. Love your story, Dr. Margaret.
I love her passion. I love her passion as well.
What am I doing right now? The medical board could take away my medical license, which is a piece of paper that the government gave me. Does that take away my ability to know what's wrong with somebody when they come to me? No. God gave me the gift of being a healer. So what I'm doing now, there's a parallel medical system out there with the indigenous tribal Indians. So I am a certified tribal practitioner under treaty with the FDA and HHS. So I do clinical studies on COVID prevention and early treatment. I have weight loss, pain management, anxiety, depression, long COVID, post-vaccine injury. So I am still doing medicine as a practitioner in a different way that's like being on an Indian reservation without being on a reservation. It's completely private. Thank you.
You took it all the way to India, man. Oh my God. Shout out to Dr. Margaret in the building. We definitely appreciate you and appreciate what you're doing as well. But I definitely want to hear from the other side. I want to gauge that perspective in regards to, all the things that you said. So let me go to Dr. Eugene. I'll go to Dr. Eugene and then I'll bounce it back to Drew comments and then I'll go to Steve Kirsch. Dr. Eugene, you heard Dr. Margaret. What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I'm really sorry that you lost your medical license. I don't know the specifics or anything, and I don't need to delve into that. But I'm glad that you're able to still practice. I think tribal medicine you were mentioning, so that's great. I just think that
Eugene,
especially
why don't you go practice tribal medicine? Is that what you studied to do? You are
Dr. Lee.
You idiot! You just said that.
What? Was it Dr. Dr. Lee is officially in the building. Dr. Lee, just give me 1 second. Let me have the mic on Dr. Eugene. I'll circle back to you. I promise. Dr. Eugene, please go ahead.
Yeah. So anyway, this is the main point that I want to make is none of us here, can override that relationship that the doctors have in the clinics with their patients. So it would just be extremely presumptuous.
But Governor Newsom can override that, and he can pass a bill 2098 that says I can't talk about the COVID vaccine with my patients. Who is not?
Dr. Lee, I'd be extremely scared to be a patient of yours, especially I've seen the way that you attack people on Twitter.
No, you should be scared to be Eugene Goo Goo Gaga when I'm around.
You would wreck their rectus.
My patients, I've done 8,000
surgeries. Roll their eyes.
One second, Dr. Lee, 1 second.
Responsible of a physician, Dr. Lee. You're licensed in California. You do LASIK surgeries. You go on Twitter and you threaten to botch people's eye surgeries because you disagree with them. That's insane, dude. Like you really need to face, and definitely you should not threaten to botch people's surgeries on Twitter. That's right. Insane, dude.
Eugene.
All right, let me reel it in.
That's way going against the Hippocratic Oath.
Dr. Lee, hey, first and foremost, just one second. Let me speak real quick.
I said something.
Dr. Lee, you gotta wait for me, okay? Let me speak, okay? Dr. Lee, I appreciate you jumping in the room, my guy. I like you, man. You're entertaining as hell, but Dr. Eugene is definitely a guest, in this space. I invited him personally. So, I really don't want any personal attacks whatsoever. Let's debate. Let's have a great conversation. Let's have a robust conversation from all sides.
Me.
But
he said
you interrupted him, Dr. Lee. Just Dr. Lee, you interrupted him when he was speaking to somebody else. Okay,
so saying that I'm botching my eyes is another thing.
One second. We know you're not botching surgeries. We already know that. So that's fine. Let's not focus on that, right? We've got a much bigger. I mean, look at the topic. Should children be vaccinated from COVID-19? Right? Like, this is a big conversation, right? So let's not get distracted and, turn to, verbal assaults or whatever. Let's focus on a conversation on both ends, and I'll definitely pass you the mic to jump in. But please, let's just be civil. He is a guest in the room, just as you're a guest in the room. I wouldn't let anybody attack you either. Okay, so let's keep it rocking and rolling, man. Come on, let's go.
I was Google Gaga, and I was shut up.
Man, that's not Google Gaga, man. That's Dr. Goo, man. Come on, man. That's Dr. Goo. Okay, so let me go to. I want to go to Drew comments. Dr. Lee, I'll come back to you shortly, okay? Let me go to Drew comments. Drew, first of all, man, appreciate you for jumping in the room. So Drew isn't a doctor, but, he always comes with, a lot of
Facts.
Yeah, that. From the pro-vax side. So I enjoy having Drew in these conversations, right? To, balance the stage, balance the conversation from the pro-vax side while you have the anti-vax side. So I want to go to Drew. And, my question to you is something Dr. Margaret said in regards to, the elderly, right? Essentially saying that, the risk benefit ratio when it comes to the elderly doesn't necessarily give her the confidence she needs in regards to vaccinating her elderly patients. What are your thoughts about that, Drew?
Yeah, appreciate you for having me. Yeah, so she's mistaken there. The risk benefit ratio is overwhelmingly in favor of vaccinating the elderly population. 55, we want to say 65 and older, 50, 55 and older as well. We see that they greatly benefit from vaccination, and that's just not something that the data shows. But even folks who are more on the anti-vax side have said, okay, well, at least just leave it for. We've been able to find common ground and say, well, at least the elderly folks and the older people should be the ones getting vaccinated. So what she said was actually quite interesting, but thankfully, there's no data or any kind of science to match that or bear that out. It's very much effective for really anybody, but especially the elder population as well. But as far as to the question of the room, should children be vaccinated for COVID-19? The answer is absolutely. At the end of the day, we still don't know what the long-term effects are of multiple infections from COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2. What that looks like over the course of 5-10 years and such. And so what we want to do is make sure that our children have as much protection as possible. Inside their bodies, as far as immune system that's trained to attack this virus when it shows up, and even deal with an infection before it has the ability to do any long-term damage that we already know about, and of course the things that we still have yet to learn. So, when we start talking about these variants or just the vaccination in general, even the American Academy of Pediatrics highly and strongly recommends vaccination of children against COVID-19, and so it's interesting when people who are not pediatricians think they know more than an entire organization of pediatricians who do this for a living all day, every day. Another thing it's very interesting to me, and I'll land with this, is I'm still struggling on how people decided to give the version of mRNA that's in the virus more faith and have more comfort in that going through your children's bodies, as opposed to the mRNA that is in the vaccine, which, by the way, we knew what was in the vaccine before kids got it. We knew what was in the vaccine before adults got it. All that information is public knowledge. Side effects are public knowledge. They gave me that information on a piece of paper, front and back. These are the side effects. These are the ingredients. This is what you can expect. If you have any issues, contact this and that, before I even got my shot. So I'm not sure where she was coming from with that, but she was incorrect. But I'm done talking.
Wow. Interesting. I think this is the first time on stage somebody has openly
I'll
said
just say that there was
vaccinate
a
the
Senate
kids.
hearing that Senator Rob Johnson gave before about 2 months ago. And there was a woman there that actually pulled out the package insert and showed everybody. Page left intentionally blank. The whole thing was white except for that. Both sides.
Very, very interesting.
I have a link
want
to
go
that
to
on my
Steve.
Substack. I actually did a transcript of the entire 3-hour meeting, so I will post that up on the chat.
Did
And
you
also,
have a
I
60-second
wrote
summary?
a free handout. So if you get
Dr.
COVID, doesn't
Dr.
matter what
Margaret,
age you are.
can you hear me?
Than adults, but I had a lot of 80.
Can you guys hear me, or is it her?
No, we
I
can
hear
hear
you.
you.
Yeah,
You guys can hear me,
it's
right?
her. It's her.
Okay. All right. Well, yeah, Dr. Margaret, post a Substack. We'll check it out. Let me go to Steve. Steve, well, what are your thoughts about what Drew said?
Okay, so look, I'm a numbers guy. I'm an engineer. I'm a numbers guy, and I think that doctors should look at the numbers as well, and they're not. I think that any doctor who recommends this vaccine to kids should be demanding the data, and the CDC has not produced any of the data that's necessary to make that risk-benefit analysis. So if it was really safe, the CDC would be producing the numbers and we would have it publicly. There are no numbers. Now, you can't make a decision like this if there are no numbers. Now, I just posted to the room what the numbers are from what the CDC says, number of kids who have died from COVID. Now, this is not necessarily healthy kids because we still do not have a single name of a healthy kid who died from COVID. None of these doctors have been able to produce a single name of a child who has died, a healthy child who has died from COVID. So we have about over 1,600, just over 1,600 kids who died from COVID, according to the CDC, from the very beginning of the pandemic. Okay. Now, I just did a query in VAERS just to see what the numbers are in VAERS, and I got 181 hits in VAERS of kids under 18, so this exactly the same age group as the CDC. I got 181 kids under 18 that died. Now, VAERS is it's underreported by at least a factor of 10, according to everyone who has looked at it. Now, in today's world with this vaccine, it's underreported by a factor of 41, which is my calculation. But even if it's only underreported by a factor of 10, then you have 10 times 181, which is 1,800, which last time I checked math is greater than 1,600. So therefore, this is an intervention which is going to kill more kids than it saves. Now, I'll just rest with the final thing, which is if this vaccine were really safe, the CDC would be producing the record level vaccine, the death/vaccine data for kids. They are not doing that. They have that data. It's in a national death file, which the CDC maintains, and each state maintains records of immunization. Now, those records have never been correlated and produced to the public, which suggests that, in fact, it's dangerous. And I actually do have state-wide level data for this. These are the death vax records that I've obtained from actually two of the states now, and it shows that the younger you are, the more dangerous this is, and the risk benefit goes negative, and it goes negative. It goes very clearly negative after age 65, and so the younger you are, the more negative it is. That's what the data shows. Now, if Dr. Gu has this death vax level data that contradicts my data, I would love to see it. And I'll leave it at that. Thanks.
Steve, let me just say something to you, man, because you lose a lot of credibility, and pretty soon you have to pay up anyway, but you lose a lot of credibility about when you say that no children have died from COVID. All right?
Name one healthy child. Name one healthy child with no comorbidities that has died from COVID.
Steve, that once I know healthy children that die from drinking Coca-Cola.
Name one.
No, I'll go find. I'm certain we can find plenty.
You're
if we go
avoiding
look.
answering the question. I said
you
couldn't name a child.
Hold on,
you
Steve.
Can't.
Steve, hold on, Steve. I can't because I'm not like you guys. I'm tethered to the truth. I can't just make up a name. You guys can make shit up, okay, and not have to verify it. You just asked me that. You just asked me that, Steve. You're my man. You just asked me that in the space. Now I will go and see if I can find, and I'll look it up. Now, and I don't want to. I mean, this is an opportunity for you to walk it back some, and this is what happens when you speak in absolutes, okay? Because kids are eating Snicker bars and dying, okay? Once again, people are dying from the damnedest thing, and you're saying that one child died from an infectious disease.
The healthy kids don't die. You can't name a kid. Where's the news story?
Steve, I don't walk around with a list of dead kids in my back pocket. That's ridiculous, especially for this. I didn't even know you were going to ask for that. It's not like I came unprepared. I didn't know you were going to ask.
But Jonathan, I said nobody could name, and nobody has ever named. Anytime I've asked, nobody has ever.
Steve, no one's walking around with a list of dead kids in their back pocket. Come on, that doesn't prove anything. Steve,
I told you, Jonathan, I've never nobody has ever come up with a healthy child who has died from COVID. Never, ever. Show me.
Steve, I'm gonna take that challenge on. All right, and I'll have something within 24, 48 hours because I'm quite certain I will. Unfortunately, And it doesn't take great pleasure in me looking up and finding that these children that died, because once again, I don't want to use it for propaganda. But once again, when you're saying that there's no healthy kids that died from this infectious disease, come on, bro. This is ridiculous. And when you look at all the millions and millions of people that's killed.
Jonathan, I said that nobody has ever been able to name the name of a healthy
So you're
child
semantics.
that
Oh, it's
died
now
from
semantics.
COVID.
Now semantics. So
But
you're admitting that they've died, but no one can name a
you're
name.
misconstruing what I said. I said nobody has ever been able to name the name of the child who is healthy with no comorbidities who had died from COVID.
Jonathan, children
Okay.
die of meningitis.
Exactly. The kids die.
We don't put them on antibiotics prophylactically, because you all acknowledge that your vaccine only lasts 8 months. An antibiotic lasts a week. We don't put them on antibiotics. They die of meningitis.
Yeah.
We have
Dr. Lee, let me ask you a question though, because even though you're crazy as hell and I love you, you're reasonable.
I'm crazy as hell,
Okay.
John.
I'm not talking about like psycho. I'm talking about like you don't care.
What, psycho?
Yeah,
I'm
talking
psycho.
about like
I don't
what the fuck?
But Dr. Lee, I have a question for you, Dr. Lee. Okay, do you believe that not one healthy child has died from COVID?
Jonathan, I don't know, and I wouldn't be like Stephen make that point because
I
don't.
Okay, got you. Okay.
Okay, but what I can tell you is I know lots of children die of meningitis, and we don't mandate amoxicillin. Why don't we? Children are dying a lot more of meningitis. We're not mandating amoxicillin, are we?
Well, we're not in a pandemic of meningitis.
There's strong body autonomy laws in the U.S. Children, I mean, there are Jehovah's Witnesses children that won't accept blood transfusions and they can die. And we can't even force that. Parents have a strong right over their children. If they don't want to give their children something, why are you freaking... Look, let me disagree with Steve. And let's say 100 children in the U.S. died. But why are you mandating something where the vaccine can also kill? It's clear that the vaccine can also kill. Did you read my thread, Jonathan? Did you read my thread on how the vaccine could hypothetically kill children in the womb?
Why are we talking about hypotheticals when you're not an infectious disease doctor or micromolecular biologist?
Drew, because you're talking about mRNA vaccines and an mRNA virus. You know how silly that is? You're not a physician.
I want to chime in here one.
Eugene,
real quick. Joseph,
no, stop your gaga mouth, Eugene.
One second. Let's get one mic on Dr. Eugene, and I'll bounce it back to Dr. Lee.
No, Nelson. I was
just
talking
real quick
first.
because you're saying something
false.
Yeah, you just about Jehovah's Witnesses.
Gentlemen,
if a patient is a Jehovah's Witness,
you invited me here. Stop his fucking mouth.
One second.
No, listen.
Stop his fucking mouth.
You can't
Dr. Eugene, one second, Dr. Eugene. One second.
Stop his fucking mouth.
Dr. Lee. Listen, just listen to me. Listen to me. Just wait. Please. Okay.
Topic.
Dr. Lee, listen. You gotta listen to me, okay? I'm trying to moderate the room. Just give me 1 second.
Explain this, Drew. Slow down, Nelson. I'm explaining this. Slow down, Nelson.
Slow down. I need you to slow down. God damn. Dr. Lee. Just wait.
You need to control that, Nelson. Slow down.
Dr. Lee, out of respect, I'm not trying to mute the stage. Let me just say one thing, okay? Guys, we got 2,000 people in the room. When we're speaking over one another, it ruins the listening experience for people in the audience. That's all I'm trying to say, right? So just let me, as the moderator, make the conversation flow in whichever way I want it to go. Okay, so if I want Dr. Gu to chime in, let Dr. Gu chime in, and then I'll bounce it back to you. Just let me moderate. This is my job. This is what I'm good at.
Right, Nelson? Come on, be fair. Okay, let me explain this thing about Drew. All right, mRNA vaccine, mRNA virus. Drew, you're not even a physician. mRNA and vaccine goes throughout your body. mRNA in the virus goes to your lung, and very, very little leaks out to the rest of your body. Do you get this, Drew? You're not a physician.
That's false.
You study. You don't know shit. So you
That's false.
The the fuck up sometimes. All right, Drew? You don't know that much.
So that's false. What you just said is false. You just said
What?
that the virus doesn't go throughout your body. That's
the
absolutely
mRNA
false.
virus, Drew.
You don't know what you're talking about.
Lung, and you know the early Stanford data showed this, that when you had really severe COVID, then you had breaches in your blood-lung barrier, and some of the virus did leak into your blood, and you formed a lot of antibodies. And when you had very, very mild COVID, and your experience was very, very easy, guess what happened? Sometimes you had no antibodies in your blood because your blood-lung barrier stayed intact the whole time. See, if your antibodies were so important, like you think, if they were so important, then the people who had the most antibodies 3 weeks after their COVID course would have had the easiest COVID clinical course, but it was the reverse. You were wrong. The antibody is just a sign. And Jonathan, back to you.
No, that's incorrect, Dr. Lee. First off, you have not demonstrated that you understand the pathogenesis of SARS-CoV-2. You keep talking about the lungs when it doesn't even start there. You'd actually have to start in the throat and the nasal pharynx to even have a beginning understanding to know how this virus even starts. Number one. Number two, no, I'm not a physician, but let's also hold up. I'm not a physician, but technically neither are you. You're a LASIK surgeon. You should not be giving advice about infectious disease and immunology. Now, if it comes to cataracts and glaucoma, all day long, I'll listen. I'll shut up. I'll take your word for it.
Go ahead.
To be honest with you, but this is outside of your lane.
Shut up, Jonathan.
Can I chime in here real quick?
No.
Very quick, because you said something really false, Joe. You said something really false as a physician, and that has to be corrected. There are 2,000 people listening. I just want to have a chance to correct that. You said, right, that a Jehovah's Witness child, if they needed a blood transfusion, let's say from a trauma, that you can override that. That's 100% false.
And it's very, very difficult to do. Do you agree? It's very, very difficult to do, Eugene. It's very, very difficult to do.
Will transfuse the blood to that Jehovah's Witness child.
Is it or not?
Despite the religious beliefs of the parents,
is it very not
children, right? You get a court order. You can
get a court order.
So
every vaccine.
So why would
vaccine you want to give to a child, give a court order then. Don't mandate that stuff. You understand this, Eugene?
One second, gentlemen. One second, Dr. Lee. You know, I mean, you got to let me moderate this room, my brother. Okay. If you disagree with him, just let him finish. Listen.
Oh, no, but
listen to me. Listen, Dr. Lee. Okay, I keep trying to talk and keep trying to interrupt me. If you disagree with him, let him finish. I'll pass you the microphone, and then you're gonna rebut him. Okay.
And
let's keep it civil.
Come on, now,
Dr. Lee. Dr. Lee, trust me, I'm trying to flow with you, my brother. Just let me handle this. Okay?
Jonathan, finish our little discussion. Jonathan Bing.
Forget Jonathan Bing right now. This is Nelson.
Important to say.
You can't be saying Jonathan Bing though.
Oh my God.
He just has nothing to say, nothing to add. He said,
Dr. Lee, what I would say is this right here, Dr. Lee. When you're saying healthy kids, and I'll finish up with this. You admitted that. You said that you wouldn't say that, okay, that no healthy kid has ever died from COVID. And so, and that's all I wanted, someone else to come out and say that, because that was a very broad statement that Steve Kirsch made there. And I didn't agree with it. Steve, I'll be seeing you for my 50 pretty soon, too, by the way.
Okay, cool. We got that out of the way. Now, we're going to do this. I want Dr. Eugene to finish his point, and then I'm going to go back to Dr. Lee. Okay? Let's do that. Boom. Dr. Eugene, please go ahead.
Thanks, Nelson. So I just, out of the many incorrect things that Dr. Lee was talking about, one of the things I just want to push back on is he falsely claimed that for a Jehovah's Witness, child who needed a blood transfusion, if the doctor wanted to give a blood transfusion to save the child's life, that they wouldn't be able to do that because of the child's religious beliefs. That's incorrect. In all the states in this country, right? If a child needs a blood transfusion to save the child's life, especially if it's from a trauma, the physician is empowered to give that blood transfusion to the child to save the life, despite the religious objections of the parents. You can't do that for an adult patient who's a Jehovah's Witness, but you can do that for a child. And I just want that to be clear, because there's too many things for me to correct for Dr. Lee, but as a physician, he should know that that's the case. And I'm surprised that he would just spout out patently false things. That's all I had to say.
Go ahead, Dr. Lee.
Okay, so, Dr. Jin and I have a history. He's a young little brat who doesn't have a lot of experience. He didn't even finish his residency. He hired doctors under him. I'm a physician who scored 97 percentile on my boards, went to the University of Michigan. I've done 80,000 surgeries, and I've never had a lawsuit or claim or settlement since I finished my resident fellowship at USC under Dr. Peter McDonald, who is currently the director of ophtho at Johns Hopkins. And he's talked to me every month or two for the past 3 years because he thinks that the stuff I've discovered is brilliant. And so when Eugene, who's a nobody in academia, who knows nothing, has the gall to, when I explain the single biggest flaw in the history of medicine, the fact that the vaccine, when you give it, you form antibodies in your blood. And the theory is those antibodies in the blood neutralize the virus before the virus can infect the lung cell. Well, they made a huge mistake because the lung is an airspace and the body is 70% water. And if our lungs couldn't keep water out, then we would fill and drown in our own fluids, and we don't because the lung is surrounded by a waterproof barrier called the blood-lung barrier. I didn't invent the phrase, Google it, which can stop water molecules that are 18 Daltons in size. The COVID antibody happens to be 145,000 Daltons in size. So if a water molecule looks like a baseball, the COVID antibody looks like a small car and has no path across the lung barrier. Now, this Gaga guy, we went back and forth. He tried to explain to me how it occurs, and then he ended up tweeting, "Oh, it does cross," with no citations. No, it doesn't work that way. There isn't a single peer-reviewed paper on Earth that shows how the antibody can cross the blood-lung barrier via an active transport system. Now, look at the situation. That's just one point. In the year 2020, before COVID came, who in the world, who in the US had a COVID-19 antibody? No one, because vaccines didn't exist. And the only way you can form a COVID antibody in your body without a vaccine is via having the infection. And if you hadn't had the infection, you don't have a COVID antibody in your body. It takes either an infection or the vaccine, and you didn't have either in the year 2020, and 20 million of us got COVID, and 99% of us healed. Within a week, 80% of us healed without a COVID antibody in our system. The COVID antibody is the ultimate red herring. It wasn't related to how we healed. And we want to talk about children. So I'm going to go off on this for a little bit. Because children, a 6-month-old human infant makes less than 10% of the COVID antibodies, total antibodies that a 6-month-old infant can make is less than 10% by concentration that an adult can make. So if an adult's concentration of COVID antibodies drops to 10%, everyone freaks out and he needs a booster. But the max a 6-month-old infant human can make is 10%. And that 6-month-old human infant, having never been vaccinated, having never had prior COVID, with a mother that never had COVID, can get COVID and wipe out 10 billion viruses from its body without antibodies in its system. To believe that antibodies are so relevant for viruses, later, at some point, the world will know antibodies are useless against viruses. That was the ultimate red herring. And this is how simple it gets. Here's how simple this is. If the vaccine industry thinks their measles vaccine was responsible for the decrease in measles over the past 40 years in the US, okay, here's an alternate hypothesis. The mom sees red dots on Johnny's face, doesn't let him go to school. Visualization of red dots, isolation, that prevents measles. Now, you will never be able to come up with another theory to show this is how strong the theory is. It uses isolation. The measles vaccine doesn't get credit. Visualization of red dots followed by isolation. That's very strong. There is nothing in science that is stronger than isolation to prevent the spread of viruses. So the measles vaccine, they think that they're 99% responsible for the decrease in measles. I say isolation was really powerful. And the problem with my alternate hypotheses now is you can never disprove it. Because in order to disprove is you'd have to blindfold 1,000 people for 5 years and see if visualization is useful or not useful. There's no way. And so, see, the whole idea that vaccines. Now, if I can poke holes into something that has been given out 50 billion times in the world, and I can poke holes in it with
Can
one.
I respond to you've been talking.
He doesn't know what an antibody
You just
is.
No, and you personally attacked me, so that's why I need to personally respond to what you said.
Yeah, Dr. Lee, you've been going on for quite some time there. For quite some time. Let's get another person on the mic.
Because they've had 3 years, Nelson.
So I need to respond to the personal attack.
It's all good. Dr. Eugene, please go ahead. Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So because he personally attacked me and impugned my character, I want to tell my story of what happened to me because of that personal attack.
Relevant.
Right? No, because you personally attacked me. So you can't
Dr. Lee, I need one
Why
mic on
are
Dr.
you always cutting off Dr. Lee, Nelson?
Who? Me?
Yes, Nelson, you.
What?
No,
fuck that.
Dr. Lee, please don't.
Don't everybody, everyone can look you up. You're a fucking nothing.
Can I?
You're a nothing, Eugene.
Greg, come on, man. I mean,
stop
Jesus
it. Let's
Christ.
talk about children.
Okay.
I have that right, do I not?
I am interested in talking about children. I don't want to hear about
you know what? Let me grab this goddamn microphone. Okay. You know what? We're gonna treat this goddamn room like boot camp right now. Okay. This is gonna be a military boot camp moving forward. Okay. Dr.